addiction needed treatment. Like diabetes needs insulin, I needed domestic abuse intervention. Like infection needs antibiotics, my social isolation needed friends and loved ones. I was not a bad person doing bad things, I was a sick person needing to get well. When I went through this, I had no advocacy, nobody there to tell me what things meant and what the consequences were for agreeing to legal orders. I didn't understand. I didn't have an advocate who could help direct me to the treatment I needed, and so my daughter and I lived separately for almost all of her childhood. Today my life is very different. I'm here in front of you, 4 years clean and sober. I'm completely free from domestic abuse. In fact, I'm in a very supportive and loving relationship today. I have friends and loved ones in my life. I attend college and have aspirations to support women in a professional role in the future. I actually already do that today by working as a volunteer with Reform and other charities to raise the voice of women and show them where to get the help that took me far too long to access. And most importantly of all, my daughter lives with me today. Things need to change. Rather than a punishment style of intervention in families where social workers perceive risk and harm to children, there needs to be a health perspective which recognises people are suffering with a curable condition. Viewed through a health lens, we could provide the support needed to keep families together. So often we complain that women are repeating the cycle. Why are we not recognising that the state is now repeating its own failed cycle and needs to change?
Can I ask, you say your daughter lives with you now. How old is she?
She's 18 now. She came back when she was 16.
And what's your relationship like?
It's really good. So although she was in the care system, we still had contact throughout her life, so we've always been able to maintain that relationship.
Do you think that she did need to be taken off you? I mean, obviously there were other routes to getting out of it, but given your situation at the time?
My situation at the time, I believe that the best thing was for her to be removed, but also I could have done with the support to get her back straight away would have helped.
Yeah, and the women that you're helping now, are you finding that there are services for them to use?
We have a lovely charity called Reform, that is for people that have experienced child removal or that are going through proceedings, and if I had that then, it would have changed my life.
That was Kirsty talking to me. Well, it's Prime Minister's Questions today, so we're joined by our occasional PMQs panel, and today I'm pleased to say we're joined by Wes Streeting, Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and by James Daly, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Body, MP for Bury North. Good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon.
And before we hear the exchanges from the Commons, we'll hear them in a moment. We're keen, as we warned you, to start on this report that came out today. And James Daly, can I start with you? Doesn't it make sense to spend money on benefits in advance and support families rather than to end up spending more mopping up the consequences of poverty? And that would mean reversing some of the changes, as we heard Tavara Bennett say.
I think we heard through the very powerful statement that you've just read out that each family is different, each family has individual challenges, has things that they have to overcome, that they need support in respect of. I think Kirsty talked about substance addiction. I was for many years a criminal defence solicitor. I was somebody who saw at first hand how the state, through its various different arms, tries to offer support and help to all to people involved with substance abuse and the challenges that brings. So what I do think is that the cost of social care is a huge burden on local authorities and others. I think how money is spent is a hugely important debate, but I think that in terms of your first contributor, that there has to be more debate and thought put into how that money is spent to help people with the individual issues and problems that they have, that are creating the circumstances where a child is taken into care.
Wes Streeting, where are you on this? Because Labour's made it clear that it's not planning to change the two-child limit on benefit, and yet that's one of the first things she says would make a difference.
Well, I was struck listening to that very powerful and deeply moving statement that money is obviously a big challenge in people's lives and can cause all sorts of stresses and anxieties. But there's a wide range of support that people need, especially if they reach those moments of crisis. And I was really moved by the argument that we need a sort of a health-based approach. And I think, you know, in one of the arguments I've been making about Labour's health reform agenda is, you know, one of the three big shifts we need in our approach to healthcare is a shift from treating sickness to trying to prevent it in the first place. And I think we need to take a similar approach to families who end up costing an enormous amount of money in terms of their costs of failure. And I think part of, you know, what Liz Kendall, our Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Alison McGovern, who's our Shadow Employment Minister, acting up in Liz's absence at the moment, are making an argument about in relation to benefits and welfare, is we've got to look at a reform approach that makes sure that people get the right support at the right time in the right way.
But do you accept the link with poverty? Because what's so clear when you read this report is they're drawing a direct link with poverty.
Absolutely.
That's why they explains the huge disparity between north and south and between different parts of the country. And then, therefore, surely the logical thing is it makes sense to put the money in ahead rather than afterwards. But you're not, as far as I understand, certainly from all the Labour policies so far, Labour got in, there's nothing you're going to do differently.
Well, I don't think it's fair to say there's nothing we do differently, and I think that actually what we are doing, because not only is the economy in a terrible mess, but the public finances as well, our starting point in every area of public policy is to look at how money is currently spent and ask some fundamental questions about whether there is a better way of spending that money to greater effect, which, by the way, even if the Conservatives hadn't crashed the economy and we were awash with loads of cash at the moment, I would suggest it is a good approach to sound management of the public finances and to make sure we're spending money in the right way, because we are, I think it's an indictment really on the last 14 years that here we are with a much higher tax burden, and yet all around us we see the price of failure and mismanagement, so we are paying an awful lot and not getting much back in return.
Now, James Daly, I know you are going to be very keen to come back on that, but I'm going to ask you just to hold fire, and I'll give you first response after we hear some of the clips from the Commons this lunchtime. In Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, asked the same question of the Prime Minister 3 times. So let's hear his third attempt. Here's Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this really matters. He's had 2 chances to rule out these cuts. Cuts to NHS, cuts to tax or pensions or tax rates. This matters to millions of people watching who want to know what's going to happen to their NHS and pensions. It really does matter to millions of people who are watching. So I'll be really generous now, give him one last chance. Very simple, very clear. Is his £46 billion promise to abolish national insurance being paid for by cuts to the NHS, cuts to the state pension, or yet another Tory tax rise?
And this is some of Rishi Sunak's response.
It's another week where all we heard is political sniping, Mr. Speaker, not a word about their plans for the country. He's failed to acknowledge that since we last met, taxes have been cut by £900, state pensions gone up, free childcare has been expanded, wages have risen for 9 months in a row, Mr. Speaker, and just today, inflation down again to 3.2%. Our plan is working and the Conservatives are delivering a brighter future for Britain.
James Daly, why didn't he rule out any of those things that the Labour leader put to him for what has been floated, this £46 billion national insurance cut?
Well, I think the context of the question is that as a Conservative and as a Conservative Party, and through the recent actions of the Prime Minister in terms of national insurance cuts, we've seen that we want to reduce the tax burden as much as possible. I think the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have outlined that there's an aspiration to get rid of the double taxation of national insurance. And I don't actually think there is a basis upon which that any cuts to the departments are outlined by Keir Starmer are either planned, going to happen, or are needed in terms of that long-term aspiration. But I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister has reiterated that this is a party committed to reducing the tax burden on hard-working people.
Right. On another matter, it was your complaint that led to the police investigating Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner. Investigation about the sale of her council house and apparently over electoral law offences, although the Times this morning has at least multiple allegations over Rayner. Yesterday, you didn't or you couldn't say what offence you thought she'd committed. Do you still have an idea of why she should be investigated by the police? I mean, is it something you can't say or you won't say?
Well, no, I've taken the view that I wrote for police. I think it's highly important that, and I think that a number of politicians have made this point, that politicians should be held to the highest standards. And in terms of the integrity of our tax system, our electoral system, I think it's important that when there are allegations to investigate, that those are investigated. My only point, which clearly people disagree with, is that the police have decided that on the information that they have, that they are investigating these matters, and I would prefer and think it is fair to allow them to get on with their job and to take the steps they think are necessary to investigate.
So it's the tax issue. It's the tax rather than the electoral law offence.
There were. I think that if I'm not wrong, I think that it appeared that Greater Manchester Police outlined certain information which was in the Times today, and that information is accurate.
Wes Streeting, from Angela Rayner's point of view, from the Labour Party's point of view, it could all be cleared up if she just published the statement of the facts of where she was living when. Why doesn't Labour? Why doesn't she do that?
Well, Angela Rayner's answered lots of questions on this, and all the way through has said she's willing to talk to HMRC, she's willing to talk to the police. Greater Manchester Police are now investigating. We make no criticism of that, and Angela will cooperate fully, and I think we'll be able to draw a line on all of this and come out stronger. This is a familiar Conservative Party playbook now. We saw this a couple of years ago to Durham, where we saw the same tactics used. I think it's a very deliberate attempt to distract from just talking about the fact they've got £46 billion worth of unfunded commitments to national insurance.
It's all over the front of one of the national newspapers this morning. Surely the Labour Party just could get ahead of this if they just went public.
Well, look, the police are investigating now, so we've got to leave it to them, and Angela will cooperate fully. But if people are in any doubt whatsoever about Angela Rayner's integrity or confidence, look at the fact that she said if the police find she's broken the law, she will resign as deputy leader of the Labour Party. I mean, that's a stark contrast, by the way, to the Prime Minister, who was fined for breaking the COVID rules he asked everyone else to follow and did not resign. So I think there is a clear contrast there, and we will not let them get away without answering the question that would be put to every single Labour spokesperson on every single broadcast programme if we had made a £46 billion unfunded commitment. Is it spending cuts on the NHS or cuts to the pension? Is it rise in tax?
James Daly, thank you both very much. The charity Human Rights Watch has warned that while the world's attention is focused on Gaza, abuse by settlers in the occupied West Bank is soaring. The organisation says the Israeli military either took part in the attacks or did not protect Palestinians. The Israeli police in the West Bank will also now include a special team ordered by the National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, their job is to target and arrest what they describe as left-wing activists in the West Bank. Israel has accused activists of passing information to the United States and to European countries about settlers and outposts that they've sanctioned. The mayor of the town of Akraba in the West Bank, Salah Bani Jabba, spoke earlier this week about an attack by Israeli settlers on his town.
Settlers started coming in civilian clothes with weapons in front of the Israeli army. The shooting was by the troops and settlers. There was heavy gunfire with the aim to kill. The distance between the settlers and the youth was about 15 metres. There were 2 injuries in that instance, and it resulted in the death of 2 in the same place. Yesterday there was communication, just as there has been for the past month, with the Israeli side and the Palestinian liaison office, and they reported about the violations that the settlers were carrying out, but the occupation forces did not do a thing.
Ziv Star is the executive director of Yesh Din, an Israeli human rights group which monitors West Bank violence, and she explained what's been happening.
2023 was the most violent year in terms of sexual violence in the West Bank, with another spike after October 7. What we see is a lot of incidents, violent incidents, a lot of casualties, a lot of people who are shot by live ammunition. We've actually seen many Palestinian communities having to leave post in the West Bank that was missing, and then on Saturday his body was found. And since the word got out that he's missing, and even more so after they found his body, there was tens of violent incidents throughout the West Bank. Specifically, we've seen a very disturbing video from a security camera in the village of Dir Digwan on Saturday, where you can actually see on camera a group of settlers go into a parking garage where there is a parked car, spilling gasoline and then lifting the car. The car is catching fire, and you see at the back there is a group of soldiers just looking at them, doing nothing. Not stopping them from actually damaging the car, but also after the deed, they just walk away. No one is trying to detain them, to stop them. We've known it's the case in many cases in the West Bank, but we never had such a good, I think, documentation of how it stands.
The role of the IDF is to protect everyone. What you're seeing is what? That they stand by?
We see them stand by and actually providing protection to the violent settlers while they do whatever they want to do, basically. More than 90% of the files actually get closed without indictments to violent settlers. So the whole, I would say, chain of law enforcement in the West Bank is designed in order to provide kind of impunity to violent settlers.
The UK has sanctioned for settlers. Has that made a difference?
I think we don't see the difference on the ground yet. I can't say that it had a chilling effect on the ground, but I think it does have a chilling effect on Israel, or at least I hope it will and has an effect on the point of accountability.
Would you have the international community, countries like the UK, do more?
Of course, and we've been trying to have them do more and be more involved. Even sometimes suggesting maybe it's a good idea to send some international forces on the ground, even as an observer, to create de-escalation of the situation in the West Bank. But for sure, the international community should apply all the pressure it can on Israel to protect Palestinians.
You talk about a pickup in violence. Are you worried about it getting much worse?
I do, because I see the government. I'm seeing what's happening on the ground since this government was formed. And the policies and changes they create, both legally but also on the ground, is really seen and really felt. And I think what we've seen in the recent week